G'day folks, and welcome to this session report from a game of War of the Ring that we have just wrapped up. Now, I don't normally do session reports on our games of War of the Ring, but this was the closest, most epic game of War of the Ring that I've ever played, and I just had to do a report on what happened. I took some photos of the gameplay. Now, we used the base game, and we added the Warriors of Middle-earth expansion. Now, this adds treants, eagles, it adds, what else? The dead men of Dunharrow, the corsairs of Umbar, the wild hillmen of Dunland, and the giant spiders of Mirkwood and Mordor. These are treated as factions, and they're almost like, for those who haven't used this expansion before, they're almost like companions that have special abilities. They don't normally engage in combat, but you activate them through certain faction card events, and they do special things. So that's the base game cover image. This is the Warriors of Middle-earth cover image. It really adds a lot of flavour to the game. Each of these factions, so I play the Free People's player, the treants, start in Fangorn, and they can intercept usually Isengard forces. The dead men of Dunharrow sort of work down around Dol Amroth, and the eagles usually start up in the Eyrie, and they can fly around the board and do special things. So I was a Free People's player, and this is my copy, and I will point out that these are my speed painted miniatures. I painted the entire base game in under a week, so do not pay too close attention to these miniatures because they are rough, but they add a bit of colour at least in contrast to the plain blue or red that you see in the miniatures as they come in the box. So things started off pretty well for me as the Free People's player. As usual, I focus on gradually pushing the Fellowship along that track. I managed to get, remarkably, up to 5 movement points without being detected. And this let me move around to Lorien. Now, I'm not going to go through all the rules, but I will highlight basically that there are 2 games going on simultaneously here. There's the military aspect, where you are trying to conquer enemy strongholds, and there's the Fellowship aspect, where the Free People's player is trying to weave the Fellowship, which you can see down here in Rivendell, trying to find a path up to Mount Doom. Once they reach Mount Doom, they go along this Mount Doom track, and they need to drop the ring in Mount Doom. They have a corruption track, and the shadow player is trying to corrupt the Fellowship. If they ever reach 12 corruption, the Free People's player instantly loses the game. And that's probably the most common way that the Free People's player will lose the game. In my many gameplays of War of the Ring, you most commonly win or lose based on either corruption for a shadow player victory, or dropping the ring in Mount Doom for a Free People's victory. It is very difficult for either player to win a military victory. We don't see that too often. The Free People's player, I think, only needs 4 victory points, and they get 2 for a stronghold and 1 for a settlement, I think, and likewise for the shadow player. They need 10 victory points, usually by capturing Free People's strongholds. So let me go through the game. Early in the game, as I said, the Free People's player is really trying to push up the Fellowship and trying to advance the Fellowship quickly early. At the same time, they have to manage this diplomatic track over on the side of the big map. They will gradually push these nations to war. And so early on, as a Free People's player, my standard move is to advance Rohan, which you can see here, and Gondor, which you can see here. They are inactive, which means they cannot recruit forces yet. But as soon as they're attacked, they become active and they kind of start to advance on this track more rapidly. You can see here the shadow player very quickly gets some of their nations to war. Early in the game, I separated Aragorn. You can see Aragorn just here. I separated him from the Fellowship and charged him down south. Because I was doing pretty well with my advancing the Fellowship, I was able to separate him, bring him down to not Minas Tirith, to Helm's Deep, and there he could activate the dead men of Dunharrow. It's pretty early in the game for me to do so. This brings on the dead men. Now, I haven't painted the miniatures in my Warriors of Middle-earth expansion, so they'll stand out quite clearly, which is kind of good for showing you where things are. The dead men of Dunharrow begin here, and most of what they're doing is attacking adjacent enemy forces and forcing them to retreat. So they terrorize these shadow forces and force them to retreat. So they were very valuable. This is still early game. Note where they are. Note where the Southrons and Easterlings are here near Dol Amroth. It's a bit blurry here in the background because I'm focusing on the Dead Men card, but this is the situation. This was critical. Notice there is a siege of Helm's Deep hasn't even started yet, and the siege of Minas Tirith has commenced. So the forces of Sauron have advanced out from Mordor. They've secured Osgiliath, and they begin Helm's Deep at around the same time that these guys are about to push into Dol Amroth. They haven't commenced the siege yet, they're about to. Okay, that is an important consideration for the future of this gameplay. Here's the broad overview, and here now you can see the Corsairs of Unbar have advanced along the coast. They've commenced that siege of Dol Amroth, and the Fellowship has moved. They've started here, they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into Lorien. There's reasons they move to Lorien as opposed to advancing further. They can recover corruption. Now, at this stage I had no corruption, remarkably. And I'm basically a third of the way, if not almost half of the way, towards Mount Doom. So things got off to a really great start. The Shadow player had struggled to find the ring. Every time I try and advance the ring, the Shadow player will roll a number of d6s equal to the number of dice they have in their pool, up in the top right corner here. And they usually need a 6 to hit. They add a modifier based on every previous attempt I've made to advance the ring that turn. So if there's already a blue dice there and I try to advance the ring again, they'll then hit on a 5 or a 6. If I try for a third time, they'll hit on a 4, 5 or 6 and so on. So usually as a Free People's player, I'm only doing this once, maybe twice in a turn. You've got to assess your chances of being found. If I'm found, the Shadow player will draw a hunt tile from a cup, and it will cause damage to the Fellowship. It may reveal the Fellowship, it may hurt companions, and so forth. So here's the situation, still relatively early in the game. You can see over here, this is Dol Amroth under siege. You can see Helm's Deep not yet under siege. And I think by this stage, Minas Tirith fell remarkably quickly. Usually Minas Tirith holds out for a long time for me. I had reinforced it. I believe I had 3 regular units and 2 elites with some leaders, and it fell in quick time. Not much is happening elsewhere on the board. Here, the Eagles have entered play. You can see them down here in the Eyrie. They don't play a large role in the evolving situation, but there they are. And Gandalf has moved to Fangorn, where he's about to call upon the Treants to help the Fellowship. That's it. That's the main area of activity, mostly down here in Gondor and Rohan. Okay, so here's the situation. You can see the Treants have entered play. You can see actually the siege of Minas Tirith is ongoing. It's off to the right. I will slide this along so you can see the forces in Minas Tirith off to the right here. So they were quite strong, but being ground down. Dol Amroth only had 4 regular troops, but there wasn't a lot of activity. It wasn't a strong Southron Easterling force down there. Meanwhile, as you can see, the Shadow player has brought in the Corsairs are up here, their ships. They've got the Wild Hillmen of Dunland down here. They help with this attack on Helm's Deep and the surrounding areas of Rohan. And then we've also got the giant spiders of Mirkwood and Mordor. And they have sort of come out here and they will help with these attacks on Lorien in the center here. Aside from that, I'm continuing. You can see my track. If I move this image up, this is the Fellowship track down the bottom here. It shows my corruption. So I'm at Lorien. My corruption level is only 2, but I've moved 2 spaces away from Lorien. So pretty soon, in a moment, I will declare the Fellowship to be 2 hexes closer towards Mordor. And this is where things start to ramp up and get interesting. This captures the situation down towards Dol Amroth, and this is where I need to acknowledge and praise the work of the Dead Men of Dun Harrow. So they are basically recruited here, and they can be rallied in this location, and their special ability when you play a faction card to activate them is they attack an adjacent Sauron force. They roll 3 dice, they cause a hit on a 4+ on any of those dice. They can repeat that by sacrificing a dead man miniature, and at the end of that, the enemy forces have to retreat. So they relieve the siege of Dol Amroth, I think, I think maybe 2 times in total, that caused very heavy casualties amongst the Southron Easterling forces in Dol Amroth. Aragon, you can see here, he swung around from Helm's Deep and sought to... why did he move there? I don't know. I think he provided leadership with the combat. There may be some other reason why he moved down there. I seem to recall there was an action card that I wanted to play. So he moved down to help Dol Amroth. And he, again, his presence here was critical. So this is a situation, I believe by this stage, Minas Tirith had fallen, Peligir had fallen, Osgiliath had fallen, the forces of Sauron had moved into, I want to say, I can't remember the name of the location here, the Rohan capital. I apologise to Lord of the Rings fans. Up in the north, Sauron forces from Dol Guldur advanced on Lorien. There was a long siege of Lorien. There aren't many elven units. The elves went to war, but you cannot recruit in a stronghold under siege, so you have to kind of hold out for as well as you can. The elves provided some small help. They kind of worked to kill off some Nazgul and negate their leadership. You can see the Treants here doing a great job attacking Isengard forces as they try to advance towards Helm's Deep, which did all these things were kind of slowing down the Shadow player a little bit. All the while, as you can see, the Fellowship has now advanced. It's just off to the left of this image, off the photograph, but they've started to advance towards Mordor again. Okay, so here you can see, so what's happened now is the forces of Southron Easterlings with some spiders, they've moved back into the siege of Dol Amroth. By this stage, Helm's Deep had fallen. Edoras is the name of the location. Edoras had fallen, which freed up a lot of all these sort of Sauron forces to begin moving north. By this stage, I believe the Siege of Lorien was still underway, but it was starting to wrap up. They only had 1 or 2 elves left, elven regulars left. Some Rohan forces were able to retreat, get away. They were out in the middle of nowhere. Yes, you can see just what's happened here. Dol Amroth is the only Free People's player location remaining in Rohan and Gondor combined. This is where we get to the climax of this gameplay. The Free People's player were gradually advancing up Mount Doom. So once they reach Minas Morgul, they jump onto the first step and they begin advancing up this track. But we no longer roll dice for this. Every time they advance, the Shadow player draws a tile from that cup. As the Free People's player, I had seeded the cup with 3 additional kind of quite nice Free People's tiles to draw. I got very lucky by drawing a -2 corruption. I'll show you my corruption in a moment. It was creeping up now. By the time I reached this second last step, I was on 9 corruption. So this is now in the final turn of the game. By this stage, Lorien had fallen, which you can see just off the bottom of the screen here. Lorien had fallen. Dol Amroth was under siege. In this final turn, they had 2 regular Gondor infantry left. I'm trying to advance up the track. It's a race, basically. I need to reach the crack of Mount Doom with a Fellowship before I can lose my last 2 soldiers and Dol Amroth falls. If Dol Amroth falls, you can see the victory point marker in the background. It will give the Shadow player 2 victory points and they will win the game. If I reach the crack of Mount Doom, and if I can draw a generous tile without reaching 12 corruption, I would win the game. So we had this back and forth. My opponent was trying to lay siege to Dol Amroth. I was trying to race up Mount Doom. On the Shadow player's final turn, he killed 1 of my remaining regular soldiers, leaving me with 1 regular soldier left and a leader. On my next turn, I advanced the Fellowship marker into the crack of doom, or tried to advance it. He drew a tile. it was a 2 corruption tile, which pushed my corruption up to 11, thus giving the Free People's player a victory in this game. So I won the game with 11 corruption, 1 short of instant defeat, and I won the game with 1 soldier remaining in Dolem Roth, thus holding that fortification. I'll move my picture out of the way so you can see where this is, thus effectively holding off defeat by one regular soldier. This is a leader, by the way. They don't contribute any combat strength. 1 regular soldier, 1 corruption point for a Free People's player victory. I had no more character action dies or Will o' the Wisps remaining. My opponent had a couple of army actions left. So on that last tile draw, I was able to get into Crack of Doom, win the game before I ran out of actions and before he could just continue this siege and destroy Dolem Roth and win the game. It came down to, on his final roll, he rolled, I think, 3 dice, and I think he had 3 rerolls. He needed 2 6s to kill off my last 2 guys. He killed off 1, he rolled 1 6 to kill off 1. He could not roll that final 6 on his rerolls, and I was able to move it into the Crack of Doom. Free People victory, the closest game of War of the Ring that I have ever played. And look, the dead men of Dunharrow, they were wiped out, but they sacrificed themselves to hold off those shadow forces. The Eagles in Lorien also sacrificed themselves to hold off. The Treants as well, who were in Fangorn, also sacrificed themselves to hold off some of these shadow forces moving north. The Warriors of Middle-earth expansion was really wonderful, really thematic, really captured the essence of of those stories. Folks, if you haven't played War of the Ring, it is one of the most amazing games. Very thematic, very tense, very exciting. Thank you for watching, and take care.